Today, we're going to talk about a company that didn't just survive a global catastrophe. It was literally born from one. This is the wild story of Harmony Senior Services, a huge player in senior living with one of the most unbelievable origin stories you'll ever hear. And it all kicks off with one simple question. So let me ask you this. Imagine you need hundreds of millions of dollars to build these massive, complicated communities. What is the absolute, hands down, worst possible year in modern history to try and get that business off the ground?
Yeah, I bet this is the year that popped into your head. 2008, the year the entire global economy just about fell off a cliff. I mean, it was a complete economic nightmare. Banks weren't lending a dime. The credit markets were frozen solid. Construction projects all over the country just stopped. It was a total business graveyard.
And yet, for the people behind Harmony Senior Services, it was the absolute perfect time. While all their competitors were completely paralyzed, they saw this unique, once-in-a-generation window of opportunity. This is the story of how they pulled it off. So here's how we're going to break it all down. We'll start with how they were born from this crisis and the secret weapon that made it all possible, something they call the three-legged stool. Then we'll get into their crazy growth spurt, the major trials that tested them, and finally where they're headed now with a pretty radical new idea. Okay, so to really get this, we've got to rewind back to 1982. A guy named Jim Smith starts a healthcare development company called Smith/Packett. Now, for decades, these guys became absolute pros at building senior housing. They had the construction part down cold, but they were still depending on outside banks for money and other companies to run the places, which made them super vulnerable. To really be in charge of their own fate, they needed to build something else. And that something else was this brilliant idea they perfected called the three-legged stool. It's basically a model where they control everything, and I mean everything, from start to finish. It's the very thing that protected them from the chaos that took down everyone else in 2008. Let's dig into how it actually works. This is the real magic right here. So leg number one is Smith/Packett. That's the engine that finds the land and actually builds the communities. Leg number two, that's Wessex Capital, a private equity firm they created just to fund their own projects. So when all the banks shut down, they had their own private pipeline of cash. And the third leg, the one they created right in the middle of the 2008 crisis, was Harmony Senior Services, the company that would actually run the communities. By controlling all three, they were perfectly set up for success no matter what the economy was doing. So with this incredibly powerful, self-sufficient model, Harmony didn't just scrape by during the recession. They used it as a launchpad. By the mid-2010s, the economy was starting to recover, but their competition was still reeling. Harmony, on the other hand, was ready to hit the gas and enter what they called their growth mode era. And when I say growth, I mean explosive. In 2015, they drop a $15 million plan to basically double their size. To steer the ship during this crazy expansion, they bring in a new CEO, Terry Howard, in 2019. And get this, by 2020, they had 11 communities. That's over 1,400 apartments all being built at the exact same time. This company was an absolute rocket ship.
And Howard's own words right here really spell out their genius strategy. They weren't just building anywhere. They zeroed in on what are called secondary markets, towns that needed senior care but weren't big enough for, 5 different competitors. By swooping in and building a massive modern campus, they could soak up all the local demand and basically build a wall, locking out anyone else. It was an incredibly smart way to build a competitive moat.
But as you can imagine, growing that fast puts a ton of pressure on a company. The next chapter in Harmony's story is all about the growing pains that would seriously test them, from legal battles in the courtroom to fighting on the front lines of a global health crisis. At the very core of Harmony's identity is this powerful message from their founder, Jim Smith. This whole idea of family serving families was everything to them. It's how they built trust. But that exact promise was about to be put to the test in a federal court. So in 2020, a class action lawsuit popped up. It basically alleged that even though Harmony promised this safe, accessible haven, some of their communities actually had physical barriers that violated the Americans with Disabilities Act. We're talking about things that made it tough for residents using walkers or wheelchairs to get around. It was this jarring contrast between the company's promise and what some residents were actually experiencing. The case was eventually settled in 2023, and Harmony agreed to a big plan to upgrade its facilities. And the pressure wasn't just coming from the courtroom. Like any big operator, Harmony also had to deal with state inspectors. And sometimes they got hit with citations for things like food safety or how they managed medications. It's just a reminder of how incredibly difficult it is to keep everything perfect when you're growing that fast.
But out of all these trials, nothing, absolutely nothing, compared to the COVID-19 pandemic. The company's entire response was led by one guy, Tony Sanford. He put together their coronavirus task force and rolled out safety protocols across 27 different campuses. He was the one scrambling to find PPE when there were national shortages and managing the insanely complex logistics of vaccine rollouts. In 2021, the company gave him their first ever Harmony Hero Award, which was just a really powerful moment that showed what they valued during the absolute darkest of times.
So after navigating all those storms and really maturing as a company, Harmony moved into a new phase. The focus started shifting away from just pure breakneck growth and more towards strategic evolution. And that led to the single biggest change in the company's entire history. You can actually see this evolution just by looking at who was in the CEO chair. You had Terry Howard, the growth guy, who scaled the company up. He was followed by Margaret Cabell, who came in and drove an incredible 42% growth in profitability. And today, the company's led by Ken Sagarnik, a corporate strategist, which tells you their focus now is on the high-level long-term game.
And in 2025, it became crystal clear what that new strategic game was. Harmony announced this totally new division, something designed to completely flip the traditional senior living model on its head to meet the demands of a whole new generation.
And this right here shows you just how big a deal this is. On the left, you've got the classic Harmony model, giant campuses, 150-plus residents. But on the right, you have the future, Harmony Homes. We're talking custom-built, single-family houses for just 16 residents. It's a massive pivot away from that big institutional feel and towards something that feels intimate, personal. Well, like a home. So that brings us to today. The company that literally rose from the ashes of a financial crisis now runs nearly 50 communities in 12 states with over 4,000 employees. They're a true industry powerhouse, and they've recently been racking up Best Senior Living Awards, which just proves that even while they're innovating, they're still focused on quality. And this really brings us to the big final question. In a lot of ways, Harmony's story is the story of the entire senior living industry. The baby boomer generation is aging, and the demand for care is about to explode. Harmony's big pivot leaves all of us with a critical question to think about. Is the future of senior care in the scale and efficiency of a larger campus, or is it in the personal connection of a smaller home?